All right, so let's talk about FindViewById inside an activity. Now, FindViewById is a method that is kind of necessary to bridge that gap between your Kotlin code or Java code and your XML code for your view. So as you can see here, there a lot of people, a lot of developers have a certain amount of passion regarding which view you'll have in here for your either project where it shows basically everything that's really in here. But it's kind of a pain in the butt to navigate down to everything. So if you want your Java code or if you want to go into your resources, I mean, you have to go through a lot of different folders. And when you're in an IDE all the time, it's just a pain in the butt. So that's why Android is here. This is actually what I primarily use unless I have to do something like deleting a build folder, or if I need to get to something that's just, I know it's there and for whatever reason it's not showing in the Android view. So if we go into the layout and if we hit the preview, then we can actually see a preview of our screen. I'm not a huge fan of constraint layouts. Oftentimes I'll just change this straight over to a linear layout, but times a change, so why not learn? But anyway, as of right now, we'll just go with that. And one of the cool things about this is that you can just drag and drop. If you're familiar with iOS, then this kind of makes designing in Android a little bit easier. But if you're old school like I am, then designing with XML layout files straight with text is just as easy. So, like for instance, we want this with I want match parent, cool, and I want to change that text to say click me, whatever. Now it's doing this underline thing because it wants to add it to the string resources. Fine, we'll do that. That's cool. Yeah, click me. And so now what that did is it brings that value into your strings.xml. And this basically allows you to provide two different or multiple translations for all of your hard-coded string values so that your app can be internationalized. So if someone has a certain language setting on their device, then it'll pull the appropriate language resource. All right, so, and we have this is really important for FindViewById. It's the ID for the button or the view, because every single UI element, it has a base class of view. So everything on here is a view. A text view is a view, a button is a button view. So you can name this whatever you want. There are some conventions, just button and then click me. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll do something to the effect of a button and then the text that's inside the button. However, button gets kind of long oftentimes, and really that's what's pretty commonly seen. Camel case, or you can do kind of like a Hungarian-esque sort of thing like this. I actually tend to do this a lot. So now we will go over to the Kotlin file. And the way that we do things in Kotlin is a little different than what we did in Java. In Kotlin, we're going to say var, it's variable. And the reason why it's variable is because before onCreate starts, you're not really initializing anything. You have no access to a view because your view hasn't been created until this line is hit. So we can say my button. We can say that it's a button. However, and in fact, in this case, we actually have to. And we can say null. So, and right now it's actually not going to be happy, and the reason is because it has to be an optional. And so if you're familiar with Swift development, optionals are pretty common. If you're familiar with Java development, optionals are not common. And so this makes things a lot safer, believe it or not, by using the question mark, which is kind of a no coalescence. So what we can do here is my button equals FindViewById. r.id. So r is resources.id, self-explanatory, and then we do btn. And see, btn is actually pretty common. This is all stuff that Android does. And so by reversing it, we just don't get Android stuff. And that's it. You may see legacy code out there for Kotlin where this was required. As you can see here, it's no longer required. We can hit option and return, and we can remove that, and that's kind of the preferred. The other version that you may see is as button. And again, it's going to say, we don't really need that. So can be converted to, and see even here it's saying to do the this diamond portion, but again, then it just takes you back down to this. So learn the easy way. So now with a button, what we can do is set an Onclicklistener. And so my button dot set onClick. It's really hard to see here, so if we move down, okay, now we need to do, we can just type in Onclicklistener, and now we have a Lambda. And so right here, it's actually saying, hey, this, it may be possible that the button is null because it's mutable, and it's mutable by saying var instead of val. But if I say val here, it's going to complain right here because, hey, it's already been set to null. I'm sorry, you can't do val, so you do var. The way that we get around this is, like I said, with this, we're going to do a no coalescence. And so there you go. And we can actually make this a lot simpler by just making basically an anonymous function. It already implicitly gets that this is an Onclicklistener. And this is the nice thing about Kotlin, the biggest difference, one of the biggest differences, between Kotlin and Java. So, and here, what we can do is actually get that text view. So if we go back over to main activity, close this up, we'll go to the text view, and why don't we say ID TV text view output text view. It's pretty explicit. And we'll come back into here, and why don't we get the text view going as well. Output text view. We'll do text view equals null. And then so then what we can do is when we click the button, we can say set text, and in set text, if we do Command P, you can see the parameters. And in here it's all ticking, so we can put in a text, or we can do a char array, or we could do a resource ID, which would really be like a get string, and then do an r dot string dot, and then go for whatever our strings. I think we had a, I don't know what we had there. We had a click me, yeah. So so SmartCast text view. So again, this is a no coalescence. So we could do that, or we could double bang it. Both of them work for that. And then here it's just going to say, hey, why don't you use the proper syntax? So we can clean up our code, use proper syntax, and just do text. All right, so let's run this. All right, so if we click this, we get the title, click me. So I want to show you that just from the standpoint of getting string resource files, so especially if an application has been translated and you need to get some very specific hard-coded strings. So the other thing that you can do is obviously just a direct, say like hello world. It's going to say, hey, extract string resource. But just so you know, hard-coded, it's generally going to be defaulting to that. And here it's saying that they can be made private. So anytime you have those, definitely want to take advantage of them. And then why don't we do a log.i tag, then tagged. Now, if you see here, we have a couple of things that are just no longer required. If we do Control Option and O, they disappear. And so that's been optimized. So Control Option and O optimizes code. You can hit that as many times as you want. Another one that is cool is if you do Command A and then do Option Command L, then that reformats your code. And so right down here is the last issue, but when you have no more issues in your code, then you get this green check mark, and you always want to have that green check mark, especially if you're going to be pushing your application to the store. All right, so let's run this. There it is, nice and pretty.